It happens over and over in game development. You got an idea, you start working on it. It feels very exciting. One day, you ask yourself the question, how much time would this take me? Then you quickly answer the question, well, it might take me probably about 2 weeks. Then you continue working on it and you realize you were wrong. So you try asking the question again. Well, last time I thought it would take me 2 weeks, but it took me more. So I think this other task might take me 3 weeks. And then you start working on it and you realize you're wrong again. Reality always disagrees with the estimations. And at some point, you just stop asking the question at all. Not because you don't care, but more because it just never seems to work. This is something that happens very often in game development. And many projects this way end up not failing, but just never being finished. And this is also how many people end up spending 5 to 10 years working on the same game without ever having a deadline. If this is something that's familiar to you, this happens to you often, you're probably not bad at estimating. You're just not estimating correctly yet. The most common way indie devs estimate is the easiest way. They just ask, how much time will this take? That's a very tempting estimation way because it doesn't force any commitment. It lets them keep their ideas and it doesn't need any trade-off. Whether you work alone or with a team, this is very tempting. You get to keep thinking, you get to keep imagining, and you get to keep adding one more thing to the game. Psychologically, it feels very good. But in reality, it brings you nowhere. A quick guess doesn't create ownership, doesn't bring credibility or predictability. And predictability is one of the most important ingredients for success. Without it, you're not planning, you're just reacting. This is why so many developers feel like they're starting over and over again. They're living day to day instead of marching towards a goal. If you're one of these, you're very busy, but you're not progressing in a direction. So how do we fix this? We need to change the way we think about estimations. Instead of just thinking they should be about how long, they should also be about how much effort, how hard. So if you want to finish your game, you should think of estimations as when plus how hard. Now, to estimate, you also need a list of all the features, and you need to have a way to estimate that doesn't feel overwhelming or too accurate because you know it's never going to be that accurate, especially the first time you're estimating. So for that, you're going to list every feature. And you're going to estimate with relative values. Now, what relative values I mean? Well, one of the best methods I happen to know for estimation is using Fibonacci numbers. A bit modified though, but almost exactly as Fibonacci numbers. Why? Because when you use Fibonacci numbers, the separation between each number is about 60%. Our brains are not really capable of understanding small differences between one task and the other. So it's always better to have a little bit of a buffer in the size and the time you're going to use in your estimations. And this forces you to think that way. Think about it like this. The more effort a task might take, the more difficult it's going to be to accurately estimate exactly how much it's going to take. This gives you the buffer you need so your planning, it's more accurate in the end, because you better have a little bit of buffer than the opposite. So we're going to make our list and we're going to use our Fibonacci numbers. The first time you estimate, you're not really going to have an exact number for each one. So you have to create the numbers by guessing yourself. You have to have the smallest value for a 1. Let's say you decide that the less you can do in a feature is create a dialog box. You can say that's a 1. And then based on that, you start thinking, okay, what's more difficult than that? That might be a 2, a 3. If it's not a 3, it's a 5. Then if it's not a 5, it might be an 8. And then we started thinking in big numbers. And you try to only use the biggest numbers like 20, 40, and 100 if you know the task is going to take you way too long and you actually need to cut it in smaller pieces. So then, to estimate correctly, you're going to divide your workload in sprints. Sprints just means a specific period of time for each kind of project level of work. Let's say you decide your sprints are 1 or 2 weeks. And then you're going to ask yourself every sprint, how many points I can actually work during this sprint. So you're going to have sprints of 1 week or 2. You're going to repeat them every sprint. And what are you going to repeat? This question. How many points can I finish in a sprint? And that way is how you build predictability. And predictability is key. Without predictability, you're just reacting, you're not planning. When I started working at Doc Paradox, estimations were completely informal. Everyone would just jump in a call, discuss that day the new random ideas that the director had, and they will directly say, well, this might take me this amount of time. And that was the only thing they would talk about. They wouldn't take notes, they wouldn't commit to that specific time, and they wouldn't have any way to actually knowing if the task took that long later or how to improve that system. It felt fast, but it was very inefficient. After we started all estimating together using a system like this one, everything changed. The team started discussing complexity and effort openly. It was not only relying on the most senior developer anymore. This is something that also used to happen when you're estimating in a team. The person with most experience is going to say, this just takes this amount of time, not taking into consideration that it's only going to take that amount of time to that person. And in a big team, you cannot rely always just on the senior. Imagine that person then is sick or cannot work that fast that day. If you're a solo developer, the same thing happens. You cannot just rely on the fastest way you're going to make it, because what happens if then that day you don't feel as strong and energetic or anything to do the task? This way, planning stopped being just helpful and it start being realistic. So if you're feeling like you're lost in time while working and don't know when exactly you're going to finish your tasks, try doing this right now. Write down every feature that's left of your game, add a short description so you can remember a bit more detail of what needs to be done on it, and then estimate with Fibonacci numbers. Set how long your sprints are going to be, and do a guess, the first time at least, of how many points you can actually finish in a sprint. Then repeat the process the next week, and this time ask yourself if the amount of points were correct. If there's any changes that are going to happen in the week, they're going to make you be able to work more or less, adjust the numbers, and do the process again. You're going to see that each time you're going to predict better how long it's going to take until you eventually can actually say a date when your game is going to be finished. You don't get better at estimating by estimating harder. You get better by closing the loop. If you don't start playing the development game in a way that makes you know it's more predictable, you're not just going to take longer. You might take forever and never see your game finished. Estimation doesn't limit creativity. It gives it a direction. And the direction is what gets games finished.